True identification comes from all levels of what we're processing through. The physical body just has to understand how to see its 100% time frame, which puts everything in set positions. But how we live the cycles is not to identify the earth line and physical line grounds, and how to identify the mind and physical line in position, operation, setting. Physical grounds, modification lines, and mind lines, and space lines and grounds, it's the same thing, just different perspective how we see things. Different perspective, how we see everything. And that modifies how everything that we see is always in the presence, and understanding that is always existing of its presence, and knowing that is a nothing of its presence itself, which is the vast. The space itself doesn't need to identify itself. You have to identify how you see the vast of space, because space itself knows exactly what it is, and what it is always is the presence of everything that masses everything to its equation that brings in the yang, that processes the yang, that we process that position of operation itself. So we start to recognize how this modifies our system's lines of travel. This helps us to get into the physical body that's always 100% time frame of the center operation of itself, and how it sees everything, and how everything happens all at once, puts everything all together through clarity and focus and equilibrium and balance through our polarities, and know exactly how to see it through polar diameter, polar shift, or anything in constellation setting, or anything that's in lines of alignments and lines of communication setting that sets you in position, location, system. The physical body doesn't have to recognize its independence. It doesn't have to identify itself. It doesn't have to notify itself. It just has to identify what it always is in its presence that keeps existing, forming, shaping new knowledge of new modification setting and transformer systems. That's right, people. Transformers is what we are. Transformers in the terminology line operation signal is modify how we see things in lines of travel. Okay, so you guys have your pie charts today in your class, in your test frame, which we will do in DQ. So we modify the set position settings in triangulation and grounds. Let's go through 4 centers of flights. But sir, that doesn't look like 4 centers of flights. Now, how does the physical body see it? Across, right? That's fine. That's okay. But how it modifies the cross, it has to break down the polarity, it has to break down the equilibrium, it has to break down the set position, the codification setting. It has to come in its own codification, its own binary to its own position as encryption. So the cross is cross-examining, readjusting the operations of 2 systematical lines of setting. Cross. That's how a physical body sees the mind imagination. You work together in one operation settings. Now, what if I did a Fibonacci inside the lines of travel? Right, that process lines is set position. So what is that position? How would a physical body say that? See, adapting with the physical body can't make mistakes. It just has to modify how to use its mind imagination to process everything in its presence. So everything is the center operation of itself, but the physical body has to understand the adjustment to the alignment. Okay, so the mind doesn't need to adjust its system. Space doesn't have to adjust its system. It's how you adjust your system in your physical grounds. And that's all done through VAST. VAST itself is its own volume of its own evac. An evac to its own system is its own atmosphere, its own altitude of its own mind, of its own imagination, the process everything at position locations. So the space itself is all of its imagination itself. It's not a physical grounds. It's the expansion of everything that modifies everything in the nothingness that brings every location the presence of everything in the center of operation itself. So how a physical body sees this, okay, is basically a cross. And if you look really, really close, you go beyond. You don't look at it. You look beyond the system, okay, and you start to recognize it's a north, west, south, and east. So I put a north. Now I'm coming in my direction, okay, and sounding through triangulation. Okay, so that's bringing it into the mind imagination. So north is lines of east, east lines of west, west lines of south, south lines of east. There's the data, there's information, there's the grounds, there's the operating settings, there's a plateau, and then we come into the portal. Then we come in that position of dimensional layers that we travel through. Okay, we travel through the dimensional layers. And each layer that you travel through, you modify your system, and every single time you go through different coloration. That's that position. Is it black and white, or is it in color? Where is it in position and setting? Where is it cross-examining? When position location? Where is it in factors? Where is it in division? Where is it in location? Where is it in calculation? Where? Then it becomes the when. Then it becomes the who. What? Why? Okay? How? Okay, and that puts lines of flights, course centers, flight manifest, manifold, line operation signals, process communication setting, guest communication system, what you do, attractions. Mind, imagination, physical body, and balance. Right there, attraction. And you can see it on fortitude centers. Now that's the vast itself that moves the things. That's the intelligence that you don't identify. These are the things that you get these things in. How you get in that position. How are things done? Through the vast itself, which is the empty mind itself. It's always in the vast of nothingness. Nothingness is how you see the nothingness, not how you see the nothingness as it is. The nothingness doesn't need to identify you. Space doesn't need to identify you. You have to codify it how you see it. And that's how we see everything perspective. How we see a triangulation, how we see a box, how we see a graph, how we see a circle, how we see 1, how we see 8, how we see 4, how we see 6. Okay? There's nothing different in the physical body. It's definitely in the mind imagination. It's always creating itself. So this is no longer 0 because the mind's always creating. The nothingness, the massing itself, location that's going through it. It's all over expanding itself in lines of operation itself. So this is now an O-line operation line grounds. This is a triangulation lines of 4 operation signals. It's grounding line course centers, converting lines of graph communication, 8 line set lines of triangulation line, operation line to box frame, and set course centers of 2 frames over 1 hour attractions over B factor. Right? You know how I notify that? Because the physical body is always in the center of operation. So it modifies the 6, 1, box, 8, graph, triangulation 4, and 0. There's the bridge. Okay? So once you send the bridge, it's much easier to see it in a polarity, a set position, the setting of operation, setting, the process of your travels of communication. But you have to identify everything you bring in needs a grounds, so the physical body knows exactly what it's looking at in a set lines of its operation self that process everything that gets in position, which is the grounds, the powers, and its atmospheres of travel. The simulation it's on is that position. The simplification centers puts all process of communication center, how we process direct centers, locations, and set positions with Emily. And that process or position or upgrade. Process of lines of 2-2, line centers, operation line signals, process location setting. Now, I'm not changing information setting. I'm just putting in the observation. Now, if I go intent, that automatically changes the frequency, which she doesn't identify until she's consciously aware, where the physical body also has to identify. As there's position of balance and equilibrium, so they get in balance with each other, and modification of the energy, vibration, frequencies, and its harmonics started to identify how to communicate with each other in the same time frame. Okay, that volumes, everything that we see is their operation itself. It's always in the presence of its that position of travel. Okay, we've got 2 truths and 2 false. So we modify that position and settings, and we modify that line operation system, puts everything all together. Process the position of light and dark, and position of dark and light. And air perception itself shows you the yin, what the yang is to yang. So we're going to go through A, B, and C. Trifactor's position as centers of 1, 2, 3. 3 lines equals lines of A. Now, how does 3 lines of equals A? A is equals lines of grounds, and grounds is lines of B factors. And then we go into C factor. See, I like to travel with it, right? If I don't travel with it, I feel stagnatic. So it's kind of like, it's a waving panel, it's an operation setting, it's a waving ground line operation setting, it's a calculation system. I like to get in the groove. I like to get in the transition. I like to get in the energy. I like to get in the flow, right? I mean, I can do this. I mean, that's not a problem, you know, how I set position in equations. I could do that too. That's an equation, that's an equation. But this is better than this. That's grounding. This is operational. Okay? This is stagnatic. This is flowing. They still work the same, just different perspective how you see the grounds or how you see it, a modification of pi and set position of vast as space. Because vast as space is identified to its own operation of itself. It doesn't modify left, it doesn't modify right. It only knows the center of the operation itself, that is the vast itself. That's an evac to its own system. It's the space that's so big, you can't even comprehend how big it is. That's vast as space. You can't time space because it's the opposite. That's the positive of everything. Now, equations and operation lines and grounds converts all communications how you set your formulas to your systems of your equations. All right, you can see lines of position, lines of travel. This helps you identify your settings to your quantum self, your nano self, your positions, your settings to your cyber selves, calculations, ground lines, your simulations, or anything your self-tech. All this stuff that the physical body already knows. but it has to really understand how to listen more in a conversation piece that processes everything to a transformation setting, fully mastering itself through energy, fully mastering itself through vibration, recognizing what it is through its energy, recognizing what it is through vibration, knowing exactly what it always is, and identify how to communicate with its harmonics of communication. For travel, because it's extremely important to your system of operation itself, that helps you to really get in that position. Okay, is self-modulating and basically seeing a story but changing the story. It's never the same story because it's always creating new stories. See, that's the VATS itself. VATS itself just keeps expressing itself in different levels of frequency, different levels of time, different levels of foundation, different levels of harmonics. It's never, ever stagnatic in one set of operation. The vast is so big, it's just unbelievable. You know, you can't even time it. I mean, it has no sense of reality. It's just the reality of itself, how it sees itself, how it modifies its own operation of its own superintelligence. It's the vast that everything that basically puts you in position and setting, because it's always in the presence, because it try to understand the position where the brain is. The brain is the center. It doesn't know left, it doesn't know right, it doesn't know north, it doesn't know east, it doesn't know west. It only sets position of center. So that process is always in the presence. Now, what you guys are modulating through is 555 grounds. And then the positions and settings over lines of 555 powers, process and position of 555 atmospheres. Triangulation over grounds, pixelation over line centers. So that's position of 5 centers of measure, 5 centers of scale, 5 converting operation signals, 5 core centers directions, 5 line operation settings, 5 communication converting centers and travel, 5 operation lines of tether, high operation line centers, 5 communication system. I can just keep going on in that position. That's vast. That's what vast is. It just keeps going and going and going and going and going and going and going. But see, the thing is, the void itself, okay, is going, but it's going forward and backwards. Okay, not backwards and forwards. See, you got to understand direct and redirect, and then you understand direct and redirect. Redirect is redirect. Redirect, direct, redirect. So it's understanding action to motion to a reaction, reaction to response, response to reaction to an action to emotion. So what you guys have to modify is how you see it, not how you see everything that is operating its own self, because that's what you have to get a true understanding is, because that's a consciousness of being aware. You see everything operating in its own setting of its own 24-hour set position of operation. What you have to modulate through is that the physical body is no concept of time until it understands its instruction, that understands it's brought everything through attraction in a different time frame through a mapping system that your brain sets up. So it understands what's going on. It's that mind's operation of the system. So the physical body knows exactly the program that it puts itself in, which is the iOS, the internal operating system. So it knows exactly what's going on in seconds, minutes, and hours. So it doesn't get confused how it brings things that it already brought in through attraction. So going through the physical body has to go through different astral projections of projection itself. So that modifies everything to its vast. That brings everything location to a setting. That modifies everything to the mind. That alternates the state that you put yourself in perception that you see in set position of time. So this helps you to position, locate, and setting in 24 lines of grounds, 24 lines of scale, 24 lines of location, and 24 lines of direction and set attractions. Okay, so 24, 24, 24, 24, and 24. 24, 24, 24. Set process line, position, location, setting. So the VATS itself is basically just the everything, which is the opposite, which is the positive, okay, which is the equal sign. So how it sees itself is the nothingness that masses the vast of itself. The vacuum's its own system, atmospheres, lines, altitude, location, setting. How you see the vast is you through foundation, not how you see vast of everything else. See, that's what the physical body has to really adjust. It has to identify that it's not in its own operation until it identifies it brought things already through attraction. And that's what it is. We don't chase, we attract things. And when we attract things, we have to be cautious of what we're doing because we're bringing in energy that we don't identify. The physical body has to identify itself. So if it understands itself, it knows how to use its DOS, and DOS knows how to use its own self, its own programming, its that position. So the physical body knows how to adjust and align itself through its set position and bring it through operation at settings, brings it always in the presence of operation itself. That's the VAS that keeps motivating itself through yin and yang. Yin and yang process how we see yin and yang. That's set position of setting. That's yin and yang. Okay, this is yin and yang. This is yin and yang. This is yin and yang. Okay, that's how I see yin and yang, right? This is yin and yang. Yin, yang, yang, yin, yin, yang, 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 yin, yang, 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 yin, yang. Doesn't matter. It's all balance because I'm always processing nothing that masses everything. So I'm not creating thoughts. I'm not creating actions. I'm definitely not creating emotions because I'm always in the vast of emptiness. It's very powerful when you come in that position. Then you don't have to worry about thoughts, action, emotions because now you have yin and yang together in conscious of being aware, right? And once you stand this in that position, then you understand what this is. And then you understand what this is. And then you understand what this is. Different angles, right? So it's all about understanding how to create a pie around that through positions of light and dark. Light, dark, dark, light. Okay? Dimension, solar sail, travel. Okay? There you go, right there. Light and dark in purification. Dark and light in purification. All through dimension, solar sail. Now, let's get into the vast. Okay, then the vast is the opposite. It's direct. So it's the direction of light, not the light of direction. See, you have light of direction and direction of light. That's purification of grounds and set position and setting grounds up. That's purification. Light of direction, direction of light. Okay, now you have line position of dark light and light of dark. Okay, so dark equals light. That process light equals dark. Okay, so that's two directions in one center. So three directions of center operation lines of presence. So it's really interesting how you see it in polarity going this way and going this way and going this way in set position of operation. It's all in balance, guys. So what you got to get into is how to see the yin to the yang and the yang to the yin through coding and webbing to your system that gets you in your serving, operation setting to process your system, engaging, forming, and shaping lines and anomalies that the physical body fully comes into itself, modification everything that it touched. So it allows itself to be processing of itself, located in the system, so it doesn't get confused with the anomaly that everything around its system is not modulating to its mode control. That's right. Your physical body is not in control until you get into mind control and command of your own system. Now, for you to modify these things, you have to truly understand how powerful it is that it's controlling the physical body that you're in until you modify yourself, that you're always in projection of yourself. Now, once you understand that position, location, setting, the actual set position of the digital pad will help you to identify yourself to get into the modification of center that gets you in the presence of everything that you see, that gets in communication that you see yin and yang or anything through its vast. Now, operates every location system, puts you in position location of its nothingness. The nothingness is growing inside of you that projects everything outside your system. So immortality. Immortality, immortality, immortality. Okay, immortality is what we are. And how to process that is understanding through light and dark. So it's the light of direction and arrows of indication. And it's the directions of light that process everything information. Two-dimensional solar sails. It's that position of operation. So you got two sails in traction. So it's intensifications that converts operation lines of setting that puts all position of center operation itself. So you modify that position locations. Check this out. This helps you to identify yourself, how you see the moon, and set lines of communication. Okay? Now if I color it in, okay, you see it at nighttime, right? So half wind cycle, high travels a direction. Inside is that position. Through the sun and through the moon for operation. There you go. There's the moon. Half. Okay, so that's how you see things in space. That's the vast. It keeps growing and expanding itself to its nothingness. But it doesn't formulate anything of a letter, number, shape, and symbol. It modifies everything and dissolves everything back to zero of operation, which is always in the presence that brings everything in the future. Future is how you see the future, not how you see the future as it is. That alternates your system, how you put yourself in your state, your mind, your physical, your grounds, your operation system, the psychosis, the psychological, the mental capacity location, the mental capacity locations, the emotional system, and your physical line grounds, adaptation to setting to its psychosis, to its operation setting. There's the moon. Okay? And everything around the moon that you see is a black filter. That's just the vast itself that you see around the system. Okay? So it's really interesting when you see that information setting. Like this, interaction. Okay, just showing you. Okay, I'm just going to show you exactly how that works in set position operations. Okay? So, understanding how this all operates itself is knowing exactly what's going on in set position two-dimensional solar sails. One is light, one is dark. Now, this is light over dark, but the dark is seeing the light. So that's light of direction, direction over light. So you process that position of light over dark, dark over light, light over dark, dark over light. So that process, that position is how you see modifications inside of space. And you are in the physical grounds of operation system in set lines of travel, looking at everything in operation itself. They're observing. So it's interesting how you see that formation setting, but you're inside the set position of its bubble. Okay, you're in the bubble. Okay, you have to be in a bubble because that's where you are in set position operation itself. Okay. Okay, you're always protected as you see things. So you're seeing that, and you're seeing the moon at set position of operation. Okay, so it's really interesting how you go through the directions and understanding light and dark and light and light and dark and dark and light. Light, dark, dark, light. Dark, light, light, dark. Right in that position. Okay, so it gets a better understanding how you see that modification setting. But what you're seeing is a full circle of operation and travel. Okay, so you're just seeing the spectrum of its portal, of its wormhole. And that wormhole is constantly creating its vast, its process in direct centers of location setting. So you're not modifying that because you don't see what's going on through its vast of communication of space itself. Because it's never seen the one moon operation of its system, because it's always vast of its presence that constantly keeps creating itself, a modification of its system. Now, how you see that perception is 4 lines of angles. Now, directing lines of highest interference. That's processed in position location. Now it's night. Night process the day, day process night. So we're going into the day. Okay, the day. This is the day, all right? Just the day itself. So I'm going to show you different levels. How you see the sun and how you see the moon in traction. Okay, time zone, right? Blue, right? All right, so let's bring in some cloud provisions. Let's see some clouds. Operation and settings. There's a cloud, right? And let's bring another line of cloud. Okay, in that position. So once you understand the coloration lines of pattern and sonographic interference of black and white, they understand what black and white is. They understand what light, white, and black is. Black, white, white, black. They understand what direct and redirect. Direct and redirect is one. It's an operation settings. Process that position, location, setting, calculation, grounds. And that process line direct and redirect, process, location, setting, converting line position, summer, spring, winter, and fall. So that process everything in that position because your temperature readings, your barometers, your thermometer reading, that goes every single day, every line center, every line minute, every line hour. That process position, how you see it, and that position of cloud line converting, position of 111, process line position of 111, it's that travel equals lines of triangulation, process lines of box in flux. Time frame lines in clouds, operation lines settings, and correlation setting, and zero calculation system interactions. Okay? So it has a direct point of view, how you see the modification setting interactions. So bringing that in again, and let's bring in the day, and we bring in the sun. Okay, the sun comes in. Okay, so that's light over dark. Okay, so it's light over dark, dark over light. Now that process at position goes in a half pipe. From that position of 2/3, 3/6 lines and lines and line center location lines of 6/9 operation lines to set travel within a communicating operation location traction. Directing ground lines and high centers location system process direct centers. That puts all communication setting in travel. Okay, so as we bring in the sun, let's get in goal line, circle line, rotation lines, 1/3 graph, process line position, and travel communications and direction. Okay, and color it in. Okay, and modulation grounds and high centers. Okay, there's the sun. Okay, so as the sun's going in that operation location, the vast itself is going through light and dark. See, that's the thing. It's the opposite. Now we're going through the opposite of direct, not directive opposite. So you have to understand how to process that and engage that and form and shape lines and anomalies. It's constant communication setting. It converts everything location of angle to process everything in line to direction centers. That process position location of orange. Bring in 3 layers, 2 centers, 1 operation, 1 signal. Okay? So you start to see this in information system. Like this. All right, like this. Okay? So there's always ways of looking at the sun and knowing the sun's going through in line operation setting. But see, that's directed in the line of light, not light line of dark. So it's a resolution location LED. That process location lines and calculation illumination line graph, core centers, pixelation, high center location, illuminate line operation lines and signals, process line location setting, high process location setting, direct interference location, AC over factor, C factors over D, E factors over trifactors over C. That process line direct center location setting, how you modify everything, line communication, resolution lines of pattern, that process location setting, light minded forwards line, position location setting, that travels the point lines of graph and time zone, that operates the signal location setting, and the present operates location of its nothingness, the sun that you see in modification through time zone. Okay? The change information setting and time center. Okay? Change the operation location of timelines, operation lines, its applications, attractions, and communication. So what you guys have to modify through is how you see these things and how you identify that through angles and position of formula and all through equations, because it's all process of light and projection, and it's all process of dark lines and projection itself. So you're seeing light and you're seeing dark. You're seeing dark, you're seeing light. Okay? That's purification. Okay, now when you go to the opposite, which is the center operation, because light and dark and dark and light, dark and light, light and dark is the same. Just different perspective, I see light, and different perspective, I see dark. So once you get into that, then you come into the formula of truth lines of serum, that process of position of formula through equations. So now we come into A factors over C factors over D factors over F factors over G factors over A factors over D factors over C factors. That process line direct centers in triangulation over box frame. Okay, so we convert the operation signals. And this is where we modify line position, location, settings, interactions into Emily's communication of truth. Truth, and you see where the sun and the moon is in all different direction. But it's always in the center operation of 555. All through the simulation graph. Okay? So the process of the time zone has a center operation of itself that processes everything that we see in correlation setting to your atlas. That's right, guys. You're connected to your Earth atlas lines at position location of Atlantis. That process lines of teleportation graph line course centers to Lumentis. Okay, there's line connection setting, the process lines of angles. Set course centers network, direct line course centers and teleportation grounds into the intelligent operates the signals that communicates as high center lines of travel. There's the atlas and travel. Now process that position location is now to get in that communication highs at grounds. That process your direct centers how you modify your north, west, south, and east in configuration setting. Process lines of northeast, east, west lines of south. North line, east lines on left side. West degrees, 98 lines degrees north. Set position 95,000 line degrees south. The all process line direct center location setting, converting up recent location setting, tracks communication line at position. Set calculation high centers. North line centers lines of east. Process line direct centers. Solar winds. Process line direct center of operation. Converting time frame is set course centers 144 flux over travel. Okay. Time centers, sectors over vast. So we have a D factors equals lines of F, F14, F16, F18, and F19. Polarity converted time frame is set lines of travel. So we convert the angles to center operation setting. Presence of vast is massive line operations itself. Modulate the high center D factors over circulation of rotation lines of grounds. Convert the position of dimensional sail. Process lines of solar sail line communication setting. Override signals and location setting. Process direct centers in positions, calculate and modify in black, which is translucent of location. And set calculations. Converting settings, how you see the moon, and set lines of setting of night. Okay? Translucent over frame, inside line communication. But you have to modify that, because when you're looking at that position locations, you only see a half, right? You don't see the full planetary operation of set and operation of itself. Okay? Until you really come up close and maximize the frequencies that you bring in things in that position from above, looking below, scanning in or scanning out. Process line direct centers, scanning outline operations, scanning in position locations of ground and lines of surface. So it's process how you finger point your graphs, set position location transparent, translucent, thermal, or X-ray lines of grounds. But it's very powerful stuff, how you convert everything location of truth that follows everything to its false, that brings every location to teleportation travel, then modifies its outline core centers, directing line communication to your power grids, energy grids, and your trifactors of our screen. That puts you in your periodical tables, that processes your templates, your tablets, and your system, that modifies everything location your settings, which is your keyboards. You have a master's test coming up, my position on Friday, about your test. The test itself is the knowledge that you already know. Process that position location, how to use it through a keyboard. You have to identify how to use the mind itself, the physical line grounds operation in that position, how to use the window frame line communication, your computer operation line setting, the process every location its units, upper location setting attractions, that converts all calculate and modify. Directing line that is muscle memory that you already know, not muscle memory you're coming into. So the nothing itself is the mass of everything that's always in its presence that keeps expanding itself. It doesn't need to identify itself. You have to identify how you see the vast of its system of space, not the space itself, because the space itself knows exactly what it is. That means everything around you also knows exactly what it is. That's the presence of its system that's always in its center. Now, if we get a true understanding how to identify these things, then we truly understand how to see that information as our own system. As the physical body has to truly understand how to see itself in a 24 and a foundation of itself, modify everything that it touches in that position of its time. So it gets a true understanding that's brought everything already through attraction already, that is already brought in through attractor being. Now that puts you in positions how you use that in modification high centers. This helps you to identify yourself and how do you see yourself in space and self, which is the vast. So, you have to really understand how to modify these things, and it's all lines of all communications in that settings. But to mention solar sail, that's how you see the moon, and that's how you see the sun through all line position of truth. That processes everything in position of false. Okay, it's how you see the truth and how you see the false. How you see the truth and how you see the false. And how you see the moon and how you see the sun. Okay, but it's always in a dimensional sail. It's always in a dimensional sail. It's always in a dimensional sail traveling through vast. So you're seeing it still, right? You have to understand how to see the stillness as it keeps creating its own system. So it modulates its solar sail and goes into another direction, so we're dark over light. Okay, so it's amazing how it modifies and changes its own system of its own operating setting, changes its own propeller, changes its own engine, changes its own windows, changes its own frames, changes its calculation, changes its own live, changes its own broadcasting, changes its own database. It changes everything over and over and over and over and over, expanding, expanding, expanding. Never, 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 never stops running, right? It's so fast, you can't even see it because it's not there. It's just vast itself, which is modified and everything is empty. So you are the vast of everything that you see, which is the vast of everything is an empty glass that you always will be. It rhymes. The emptiness. No thoughts, no action, no motion, just an empty cup at all times. So that's what you have to monitor light on operation setting to your position to your earth that operates everything inside attractions. Seeing yourself in an empty glass, and whatever you fill up in your empty glass, you are bringing in through programming. That's up to you. You decide what you want to bring in. But remember, the physical body is going through it too. It's that position of grounds. So modifying that position location is being cautious in what you bring in, and that modifies every locations that you bring in. Don't tip the water, or the glass will spill all over its position of operation. Okay? So you have to basically understand that. Don't pull or leak in that position because it seizes out in that lines of communication setting attraction. So to identify these things, you always have to see yourself empty at all times. That puts you in the presence of everything that masses everything to its vast itself. All through equation, all through factors, all through traction. All right, so we're good to go in that lines of operation setting. If I tell you any more in that position, get very confused in your minds. How everything processes every location to its system, that puts every location in physical grounds, that adapts everything in location in your mind, that brings any location to its position through its vast of calculation to its own system. Okay? That's always in its presence, that's always existing, and always forming its shapes to new anomalies, new projections of the mind itself. Okay? So once we identify that, once you're sending installing into the dots itself, the dots comes into a new brain. After the dots comes a new brain, what's next after that? Once it understands itself through all levels of transformer that's always been in its informative system, that's always been in its eternal system, that's always been in the present for everything that it sees and everything happening all at once. What's next after that? New minds and perception itself. So what's stay in that formation setting? Okay, so we have DQ lines, equal ground line, course centers, classification A, level C in 5.